Greetings, Inderes TV viewers and listeners. This is Inderes Roast. I'm the host, Verneri Pulkkinen. And here next to me sits Sanoma's CEO, Rob Kolkman. Rob, welcome to Roast.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
At the beginning, I'd like to thank the audience for very good questions. I have a bunch of questions here, as you can see, to help refresh my memory. And let's go through these questions. I won't take any more questions during the live because I have quite many of them already here. Yeah. And also to remind investors, if you get interested about Sanoma after this roast or during this roast, please follow Sanoma on the inderes.fi. To begin with a few warm-up questions, Rob, I think you're quite familiar face to many Sanoma investors. You've been CEO for now around 1.5 years, and you have a long career in Sanoma. But can you tell us a few interesting facts about yourself?
Yeah, originally from the Netherlands, grew up there. My wife's actually English, and we lived across the world. So we lived for 6 years, I think, in Australia, and also in the UK, and now then since 2020 in Finland, and very much enjoying it. Yes.
Mm. What does Sanoma do in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, we try to make a difference to actually millions of people every day. And that's both in the media, as I think a lot of people realize, of course, if you think about our high-quality journalism, if you think about our TV, etc., right? Everything, that's about 96% of the Finns. And if you look at the learning side, we really try to support the teachers and the students across Europe, basically, with their day-to-day learning activities in K-12, so the foundational years.
Mm. So, a Finnish media company, but a European-wide learning company.
Yeah, we first and foremost these days are a learning company, right? And focused on that foundational, primary, secondary education. And then, of course, we have a very important role to play in the media here in Finland, and have done, of course, for many years.
Exactly. This one should be easy as well. Why do you think Sanoma is a good investment?
Yes, I think because of that strong purpose that we have, we really, of course, are also focused on making that, from a financial point of view, a successful one. And that's what you've seen, of course, if you look at the last 5-10 years in particular, around that growing of the learning business. So this strong sense of purpose, this trying to make a difference in society and media and learning, also leads to good financial results. And obviously, if you purely look at it also from an investment point of view, that focus on dividend for us is also very important.
If you think that Sanoma is a good investment, why haven't you bought more shares with your own money? If I checked correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have bought some shares back in 2024, but otherwise those shares are from incentive programs. So why not put more of your own money in the game?
It's a really good point, and I wish there would be more opportunities to do so, but it is quite, the legal team is quite strict on when you can and cannot do it. So increasingly, that's very difficult. So and of course, you need to play that absolutely by the rules. Yeah. So I did it at the first possible moment when I became CEO. But it's very difficult to do more.
Does it imply that almost all the time you have maybe some insider stuff going on, like potential acquisitions and so on?
It could be perceived like that, and I think that's a very important point. In I feel in my position to just always avoid it. But of course, the commitment is very much there. And as you say, I've been now in Sanoma for this is my 7th year. Yeah. So from that point of view, yes, it's all about the fact where can I make the difference with enough also investment on the share side.
Fair enough. If we go to especially to learning, which is the larger part of Sanoma nowadays, and most of your focus when it comes to growth is on learning, definitely. And in the last 5 years, I have some notes here, Sanoma has increased its revenue by many acquisitions in learning from 900 million to around 1.4 billion euros, pro forma numbers. Yeah. But actually the dividend you mentioned has decreased, and EBIT has increased less than revenue, around 30%, and operating earnings per share from continuing operations is at around the same level as it was back in 2019, and return on capital employed has been just over 10%. So are you happy with Sanoma's growth and value creations in the last 5 years?
Yeah, maybe to give a bit of perspective on it, what we are doing within Sanoma and have been doing now for quite a number of years is actually a fundamental transformation of the business. And as you highlighted, we are now first and foremost a learning business, right? Focusing on supporting those teachers and students. That business has actually, if you were to do the same kind of metrics, doubled pretty much in every metric, including profitability, etc., over the last, now I would say, 6 years. But it is a transformation, and what you've seen happening at the same time, of course, on the media side, is that that there has been much more pressure, and particularly, of course, also on the profitability a couple of years ago. I think the team, Pia and the team, are doing a great job in navigating that and continuing the digital transformation there successfully. But that has an impact on the numbers that you just shared. If I look forward, then of course the positives increasingly outweigh that the declining part of the revenue, and the positives being the continued growth on the learning side, both organically, but we also continue to focus on M&A. But also in media, you now see that subscriptions are actually growing faster digital than they decline in print, as an example. That's not yet the case for advertising, but logically speaking, if you look at the trends, that will happen too going forward.
So are we reaching the, how could one say, maybe a tipping point or a point where you return to growth when it comes to your results?
Yes, I think if you look at our position over the next 2 to 4 years, for a number of key reasons, we are expecting good growth, both top line as well as also on the bottom line and on the cash, which of course is really important if you think about it from also a dividend point of view. This year, 2025, is sort of that last year of more stable, and that's also what we have reflected in our forecast and in our outlook. But if you look at learning, both organically, the curriculum changes, but also if you look at some elements on the media side, that will all support growth going forward. Yes.
If you go through some your acquisitions, Sanoma bought Santilana Spain for around 465 million at an EV/EBITDA multiple of 9.3 back in the days. And it seems that, you can correct me, but Santilana has not grown materially since then. I think net sales were 122 million in 2019, and last year it was around 135. So do you view this acquisition as a success from the shareholders' perspective?
Yeah, maybe good to put in perspective. We always look at learning businesses, what we call through the cycle, and particularly in a country like Spain, and the same is true for some other countries. Poland is another good example. What you then see is the moment there is a change in curriculum, you see a spike in revenue, and then you see a logical decline again, and then again an up. Right? If you look through that, then Santilana has grown both revenue but also market share, which is of course for us an important part as well. Profitability likewise. So it's that element of, it's always which years do you pick, but if you look longer term, it is that strong position that we are after in all markets, including Spain, that also gives us a good performance there, including for Santilana. We're very happy with that.
What was the peak year then with Santilana's revenue?
So Santilana was, I need to say this correctly, now 2023 was the peak year on that. Yeah. And what you then see, and we published that as well, there is always this graph that you have probably seen many times, which has all the sort of cycles of the different countries, and then we try to give an impression of what that means overall. And there you also see Santilana then having logically that dip after a big peak, and then again up because the curriculum starts to be modernized or changed again. Yeah.
So investors should look like maybe 5-year average numbers, or
and,
what do you suggest?
And what we try to do is give a bit of, outward-looking or forward-looking kind of statements on that, and that's what we do also with this curriculum. That's also why I'm saying if you look at 26, 27, to the best of our ability, the growth will then also be supported by some of these curriculum cycles going in the upward direction.
Yeah. How do you think about pricing in acquisitions? Because this is a growth market, but as you said, it's cyclical, and they don't grow that much, I think, because I also looked your, let's say, for example, Italy business, which has been, the revenue has been something over 100 million for many years, and you also divested parts of the German business you bought at the same time later on. So how do you view the pricing in these businesses? I know that they are, in margin sense, they are quite profitable businesses, but if you pay too much, it doesn't help much your shareholders.
No, so we really look at it from the point of view of creating shareholder value. So that's also why I've publicly said on several occasions that Yes, we are very ambitious on growing with M&A, but it has to make sense, obviously, from a shareholder point of view. And that ultimately means it needs to be cash generative. That helps us then also from the point of view of return on investment, but also the dividend. And if you then look at it, we firmly look at the EBIT side, the profitability and the cash side, less at EBITDA. And the reason is that you can, in our business, with the investments that you do in content, it really is important to look at the bottom line and at the cost, at the cash side. Yeah. That's what we focused on, and that's also why we will always, think about it from that perspective. And that means we are not forced to do M&A. We do M&A because we really truly believe it creates value on a number of elements.
The acquisitions are quite scattered around Europe. So what's the logic behind the acquisitions? And when you're looking for companies, what kind of companies you're looking for?
Yeah, the focus is very firmly what we call K-12, and within that even more specifically K-12, what we call learning services. So really think about the teacher in the classroom across Europe. We support that teacher and therefore the students with lesson materials, with methods, with digital solutions, with what we call blended solutions. That's what we are looking for. And that's also what we do. And we also try to be in a leading position or one of the leaders in the market. Hence the sort of number one or number two. You mentioned Italy, big market for us. And we managed to step in, but that was with the number 3 position. And we have strong ambitions to also there over time get to the number 1 or number 2. Yes.
What makes markets like Italy and Spain attractive from your point of view?
Well, it starts with the fact that really it fits very well with that focus on primary, secondary, vocational education, that core K-12. It has really got, of course, it's big markets. It's also with that position that you have, you can really make a difference in longer term, the consolidation of that market as well. And we strongly believe that if you look at the learning market, like many others, scale over time does matter on your digital solutions, on your content creation, and also on your expertise in that core K-12.
Exactly. Are there many, just to give an overall picture to investors and myself as well, that are there many potential acquisition targets in Europe? If you're already market leader or in place 2 or 3, are there many possible companies to acquire at this point?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is twofold, right? So there is, first of all, in quite a few of our markets, we believe we're still early days in that consolidation. It's still quite fragmented. A market like Spain, market like Italy are good examples of that. So, but also in other markets, there continues to be acquisitions that we think really add value because of adding it to the scale that we have in that market. So that's one. The other one is, of course, if you just look at the market map of Europe, there are still markets there where we are not active at the moment, but where we think with the right kind of entry, we could play a really good role there too in K-12.
In K-12.
Yeah.
If all the players already know that you're after acquisitions, so how do you view from the seller? Usually when companies make acquisitions, they create value, but they actually transfer the value to the sellers because of the high acquisition prices. And I'm thinking the example I said earlier, the multiple of over 9 times EBITDA, which I think transfers to something 10 or even more times EBIT or cash flow, which itself does not create that much value unless the growth target, unless it grows later on quite a lot. So how do you view this market from the acquisition perspective? That are the target prices usually too high for you, or how do you view it?
First of all, maybe a little bit of context on how I look at some of the points you just mentioned. So there's another element here, of course, is we are a strategic buyer. And we do really see synergetic opportunities with every acquisition we do. So we look through that pure multiple that you just mentioned, which for me, if I look at it on an EBIT level, is more around that 8 to 12 times EBIT, depending on, of course, also at which point in the cycle you buy it. So that's where I'm always a little bit careful with just picking 1 year, etc. You need to do that for publication purposes. Exactly. But if you purely look at it, it's always looking through the cycle. But the synergy part is an important one. We always have synergies around the core cost, if you think about our printing and paper and those kind of things, but also our digital solutions and increasingly also on the content side. So we always look at that longer term. And because we are a strategic player, we also look longer term, where can we add value and what are the key characteristics of that market. And of course, if you look at it in the European setting, most markets are relatively well funded. If you also look at it from the money that goes towards education. So it's a good foundation. But you're absolutely right. We also say no a fair bit, especially in the time when edtech was very big, right? I mean, there was all these multiples going on. You can look at our track record. We did not buy any of that because we don't feel that that is value creating for our shareholders.
On average, how much synergies you get compared to what you expect when you buy the company?
Well, it depends a little bit on the, let's say, the business and where it stands and how much it. So it can be very significant if you add businesses to our existing, let's say, country-specific, let's say, presence that we have. So if you think about, we did a tiny acquisition here in Finland this year, Edita, and that was a good example of that. You know, then you, of course, you really add methods to an already existing organization and nothing else. If you look at it from when you go into a country, a new country, then normally we see around the 5 to 10%, you know, pure efficiencies on synergies, which is in those core categories I just mentioned.
You mentioned printing and that sort of stuff, but how much concrete synergies there are between different countries with different curriculums and so on?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the digital solutions, there are a lot because, of course, if you think about let's say for students, learning management systems or for methods, the sort of digital exercise that you have. Yeah, those are very, very similar. You only need to develop them once, right? And so that is a real one. The scale we have built over the last 5 to 10 years around, let's say also the printing and the production is a big one. And then also the harmonization of content over time is also happening. And AI, and I'm sure we get to that later, but AI, of course, really even boosts that further. If you think about content that has been developed in the different countries on the different languages, more and more it becomes easier to reuse that content in other markets.
Exactly. If we look at European population growth, especially in places like, well, here in Finland or Italy, I think at least in Finland the number of students are not growing, they're actually decreasing. I think the same applies to Italy and many other countries as well. Is there a threat that this will stop the growth in learning segment in the long run?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, the way I look at it. One is overall, if you look at all our markets together, it is more or less the forecast is around stable to slightly, but very slightly decreasing. Obviously, that depends on a lot of things that happen, but that's the starting point. Then, of course, we have our price increases, but most importantly, we also have our increasingly better position in the market. So we also see growth because of the growth in our market position. I mean, the other element is. And if you take the Polish market now, things can happen, right? Sad things can happen. Like Poland now has, like many other countries, but Poland particularly has absorbed a lot of additional students coming from the Ukraine. Of course, we support that as well. But fundamentally, it starts off with sort of stable to slightly declining student numbers, and then on top of that, you see the growth with your prices, with your market position, and with new solutions to the market. I strongly believe with our scale that we have created, we also bring solutions to the market that really add value for our teachers and students.
Yeah. Do you see that the funding or budget per student, does it grow or be stable in the long run in Europe? Of course, there's a small price inflation, as I think you mentioned already. But
yeah, if you look at it a really longer period, let's say 20, 25 years, where we try to do, then it really has been growing more or less with inflation, sometimes a little bit more. When we had a few years ago the real bigger inflation, then it takes governments a bit of time to adjust the budgets. But overall, I think everybody realizes how important education is. And it's also good to realize that our part of that spend is only a few percentage of the total spent on education, because the rest is, of course, with the teachers and the buildings and everything else, right? So it's a relatively limited part, but an important part to make the life of the teacher as efficient as possible. The more we can help with good, high-quality methods and content, the more time the teacher has to really focus on the students, both in primary and secondary.
Exactly. How much pricing power you think Sanoma Learning has in these businesses when you negotiate with the public sector?
We are very, very cautious about that, because I don't think that's the way to look at it at all. I think it is realistic to say, okay, what are the increases in cost that you need to factor in? But it's not like we are saying that those are high price increases that we do. We normally follow quite closely the inflation. As a matter of fact, if you look at the last few years, I also publicly said it took us, I think, 2 years to catch up with the high inflation that all of a sudden happened at a time where we could not immediately adjust the prices. And also our customers, i.e. the schools, would not have the budget to do so. Then we accept the fact that that takes a little bit longer.
As you implied earlier, usually learning businesses have quite high margins and very good cash flow, and usually in competitive market that also attracts more competition. So what are the elements that protect you from competition and those margins?
I think there's a few core things. First of all, it does take a lot of investment in methods for it to work, right? So yes, once it's there, it's good, but it takes sometimes 2 to 4 years to develop a really good method or to update it, right? So there's a lot of cash that also initially goes in, and then it has the returns that you mentioned. So that's one part to see. Ultimately, it is about really, really deeply understanding what the teacher and the students need. So that kind of core knowledge, and every day I enjoy in our organization the passion that I see here in Finland, but in all our locations, with people passionate about trying to make a difference towards the teachers and the students. And that really core knowledge is what ultimately drives, in my view, the high quality of the content, and therefore really making a difference towards the teachers.
You're targeting 2 billion sales by 2030, of which 75% should come from learning. Yep. So a lot of growth is expected from the learning segment going forward. Considering those, well, I would say rather high acquisition multiples, and also that the growth outlook is maybe moderate, is this growth target sensible from a value creation perspective? And do you have to achieve that? Because it will be unorganic growth.
The way I look at that is it shows our ambition, and we are very serious about it. But we will always do acquisition based on creating shareholder value, right? So, and we think there are enough opportunities out there over the next 5 years to do that. But as you highlight, like our organic growth is between the 2 and 5%. If you look at the longer term over the cycle for learning, right? So that means there are 2 or 3 bigger acquisitions that would in that period fall. We think that's really possible, and we also want to show that that's the growth we are targeting, but we will only do it if it's also got the right kind of shareholder return.
Yeah. So for you, it's acceptable not to reach that target if that would mean that you have to buy something with very high multiples.
I would like to win, so I would like to achieve the target, but we will always, of course, do it based on the fact that it makes sense for our shareholders.
Yeah, sounds good. Back in 2023, Sanoma issued a hybrid bond with 8% coupon interest to help finance the aggressive inorganic growth in learning. And at the same time, you still continue to pay dividends. Why? Why not cut the dividend and put all the cash flow to growth instead of getting so expensive financing?
Yes, I do believe the dividend did go down in that period as well.
It went down a bit.
It went down, yes. I mean, ultimately, we do believe the dividend policy that we have is an important one in the Finnish context, and we strongly support that. But it always is up to the board to decide in every single year, what's the right kind of level to do that. Our policy is very clear that we want to pay 40 to 60% and growing, which if you look forward, that's of course also very much aligned with what I just mentioned on the growth of the business that we expect. But that's our focus. So it's a balance that we are trying to get right on investing in the growth, on investing in the M&A, but also on the return for our shareholders.
I know that dividend decisions are in the end board and the share owners' decision at the end. But still, I mean, if you have good acquisition targets and promising growth in learning, would it be wiser just to cut the dividend to zero and put all the cash flow in the growth?
At the moment, this approach does not limit us in doing the steps that we feel we can take and we need to take. So from that point of view, no, I don't think that's an issue for us.
Do you think Sanoma became a bit overstretched with financing? Because usually when we see hybrid bonds, it's usually smaller companies that have really gotten into trouble, and I think we don't often see in these large companies hybrid bonds. So it usually implies that you are reaching the limits of your financing.
Yeah, if I purely look at the facts as I see them from that period, obviously little bit before me in the way of the exam.
I
was there.
That time.
But if you look at it, I think it highlighted we were above our longer term targets on the leverage. But what you also see with our business, of course, once that goes and is fully integrated, etc., it goes quite quickly down on leverage as well, right? So every time we do an acquisition, we will also then look at what's the best way to finance that. And we have, of course, been public in saying that it is absolutely our intention to, at the first possible moment, to repay the hybrid bond. And we will then look again at what the best way is of financing.
Yeah. And you're doing that next spring, I think.
I think so, yeah. I think it's March or so.
Have you considered share buybacks as a capital distribution tool? I know that Sanoma is buying all the time shares, but those are for incentive programs. But are you planning to buy shares and cancel them like many companies do in Europe nowadays?
Obviously, that would ultimately be also a board decision, right? But we have been clear that the reason we are buying these shares at the moment is for the long-term incentive plan, which I think is good business practice and needed, of course, as well. But besides that, no.
Yeah. Okay. Learning aims for 23% profit margin, I think, by next year. In concrete examples, how are you going to achieve this?
Yeah. So you might recall, when we did all the acquisitions, we also said we now really want to give it an extra push with making that scale work. That's the way we position. That's program Solar. We've taken all the decisions we need to take to make that happen. You already see that in our cash flow reflected a bit. If you look at next year, when there is also supporting more growth on the curriculum changes and the organic side, then really all these decisions we have taken will also have more of an impact on our margin, both our growth margin, but ultimately then also our EBIT margin. So that combination is giving us that 23% from 26 onwards.
How confident you are that you are able to maintain that margin going forward?
Well, it's hard work, but we are on track to deliver on that. Obviously, it will always be in that combination with the growth that we are seeing, we're expecting, and the visibility we have on those curriculum changes. Those happening are a part of it, but overall, we're very confident that we're on the right track here.
What are the key challenges here? Let's imagine that we have next rows in the next two years, and we look back and you didn't achieve those targets. So what were the reasons?
I don't like to think about not achieving it, but of course, I mean, if you look at it, there is growth, and we have been public on that. If you look again at those cycles, there is growth that we are expecting on the curriculum. Of course, it is expecting that our market shares, our market positions remain as strong as they are. So those are core underlying elements. If you purely look at the cost decisions we've taken, like in the harmonization of the platforms, in making the scale work in certain functions and roles, all those steps have been taken. So it's all about also on top of that reaching the top line growth that we aim for and expect.
If we talk more about competition, there came some questions about Duolingo and similar apps. Do you view those as a threat or opportunity for Sanoma learning?
Yeah, really good question. And I myself have been playing around with Duolingo, and I like really looking at the technology in general, right? So we constantly try to learn and be really aware of what's going on. My current view on things like Duolingo is that they are really great tools for like on the personal level, and you can learn a bit, but it's quite different from really learning a language towards a curriculum setting, towards a passing an exam that we, of course, are focused on. So we look at it, we try to learn from Duolingo also with our own gamification elements that we put in and the learning points. So that's really good, and it pushes that. But it is quite different using Duolingo compared to preparing for an exam or a curriculum change in primary and secondary education. Yeah,
I actually got some questions from people who are, or investors who are also teachers, and I think the general impression I got was that usually companies or apps like Duolingo are more agile and better than solutions that you do with the public sector. So how would you answer to that critique? And does it matter actually from your business perspective?
We always try to constantly improve our solutions and get better and better, right? So from that point of view, yes, we also look at the likes of Duolingo and see what can we learn there. I think there's a couple of considerations there as well. One is, of course, we serve teachers and students with also budgets that are, in the end, not unlimited, right? So here in Finland, that might be relatively good. But if you, for example, take a market like Poland, where it's I think something like 30 or 40 euros per student per year for materials, that compares to 150, 200, 250 in some of the other markets, right? So you then, for me, it's then not about the latest technology but it's about what is affordable in the market that we're in, and that's also a discussion we have always here in Finland. So sometimes you would love to do even more, but it has to also fit with what is possible from a cost point of view for our customers.
Yeah, exactly. What about the digital material provider Studio? That was also mentioned on our forum thread, and some teachers said that they really try to move away from Sanoma and Ottawa and prefer Studio instead. Do you see a similar competition? I think Studio mostly focuses in Finland, but do you see similar apps or platforms in other countries as well?
I mean, we are the number one, number two in most of the markets, but that doesn't mean there's no competition. Right? There is a strong competition. There are smaller players, mostly in the local markets, but they can be very good in certain areas, and we constantly try to improve ourselves as well. And Studio is one of those examples here, specifically in Finland. Yes.
Have you considered the business-to-consumer market in the learning business?
Yes, we have, and actually in some markets we do it. Like Poland, we have quite a sizable business-to-consumer market. We have a bit of that in Spain as well, and so it's market dependent, because again it comes down to what is also the specific situation of funding, of the role of the government compared to parents paying, and that's different market by market. Here in Finland, it is more direct to the schools and the teachers, because that's the way also the Finnish system works more.
Yeah, true. I think every country has a very unique system, but is the system quite similar like here in Finland, that it's indeed you have to be in contact with teachers when you plan those curriculums and so on?
Yeah, if you look at some of the school systems, of course, like here in Finland, but also in the Netherlands, you hardly have no real private schools, for example, right? Or and there is good funding from the government. If you think about the core foundational years, I mean, there's always that element of does it keep up with all the changes, but there is good starting funding. That is a different situation compared to what I just said on Poland, and therefore you also get different solutions towards parents and schools.
And regarding the business-to-consumer market, how would you compete against like those digital agile providers like Duolingo? Then of course people can use more and more artificial intelligence. I think you can get lesson from YouTube on every subject nowadays.
I think the core starts with really understanding where, in this case, we can make the difference towards the teachers and the students, and that goes to the heart of that high quality method content, really thinking through what is needed to pass the next stage of your let's say a learning journey in that specific country with those specific requirements, and that is a really important part of what we do, and we embrace technologies like AI very much, either because it's supporting the teachers or it's supporting us in our productivity. So fundamentally, that's constantly happening. I mean, that was also the case 10 years ago with some others. Clearly, AI has the potential to go much, much further, but it keeps coming back down to the point. For that to work well, you do need to have high quality. You really need to be the expert on knowing what is needed in that market for that specific curriculum.
Exactly. PISA results are decreasing in many countries like Finland, and some people criticize digital learning materials as well because it might be harder to focus when you're using devices. And could the trend toward more digital materials reverse back to in favor of books?
I think you do definitely see that, and I think our position all along has been it's about blended learning. It's trying to find the right combination of print and digital, either because that has to do with the availability of some of the let's say infrastructure. If you think about some schools in outside of the big cities in Italy or in Spain or in Poland, that's a different situation than, for example, here in Helsinki, right? So there's that element, but there is also this pedagogical element around what is really the best way of learning. And we constantly try to work with the teachers, with the students, with the governments as well to see where is that going. Example that I think many people have seen is, from a Swedish perspective, the message was, we're going back to the books, right? But what does that actually mean? What that means is it's the combination of print and digital. But there is, of course, we see that as well, a real strong reason why it is a combination of print and digital, because that's the way of learning. And it's different for a child early on, let's say 6, 7, 8-year-old, to maybe a child just before going to university, right? And you see that even here in Finland, those exams are fully digital. Then of course the student is also more focused on that. But we are supporting the different ways of doing it. And there's constant learning on that, right? If you take one last thing on that, if you take the mobile phone in the classroom, that's now a different situation in quite a few countries. It's not allowed in secondary education in the Netherlands, for example.
I think the digitalization is good for your margin. Is that correct?
We look at it from the blended point of view. So it's different kind of cost you have if you go from print to digital. But our overall investments in what we call the overall content as a percentage of revenue roughly stays the same.
Okay. This is a very broad question, but in general, do you view generative AI as a threat or an opportunity for Sanoma? Maybe we can separate this into two parts, like on learning, and then we can also handle the Sanoma media side.
Of course. I mean, the broad question, broad answer. The broad answer is there's more opportunities here than threats. And the opportunities for both media and learning are twofold. They are on the productivity gains, how our journalists work, how we work in the back office, how we work with content creation. That's great examples of where that can really help. And then there's product innovation. I think we saw an article not too long ago in Helsingin Sanomat, which had used AI to really look also at the elections and help the journalists with the, let's say, with the analysis, but therefore also with the content itself, right? We see the same on the learning side. If you look at personalized learning, AI can really help with taking big steps towards more personalized learning, more individual focus by the teacher towards the student. Really.
Do you, if we first handle the learning side, do you feel there could be more or new competition from players that are purely AI focused?
Could be, and that is also fine. I mean, I've been in education a fair bit, and if you look at the edtech from 10, 15 years ago, that's been good. That's been really good. There's been some good technology coming out of it that you could argue most of that is now part of what also we would offer. And there's also been a lot of learnings in edtech over the years of what didn't work. It's not just about the technology. It's about getting that right for the students and the teachers. I believe it's the same with AI. But the human oversight or more the expert oversight, i.e., yes, it's great to have all these tools, but is it the right thing? Is it really focused on that child at that age group? Those things are really crucially important. And I believe the human element there, the human expert element, the teacher, but also our educational experts play an important, very important role in making that successful.
Focusing on the other hand, on the media side, I think in the end, media business, the most revenue comes from advertising or the digital subscriptions. And I think in the end, it's a competition for eyeballs. Do you agree with this?
I think there's two business models here, right? And there have been for many, many years. You either pay as a consumer, i.e. the subscription, or you have the advertising, right? And we have both, and they are both very important for us also and have been for a long time. If you look at the subscription side, it's about you as a reader willing and able to pay for the content that we offer you. And I strongly believe that comes down to the fact that you have real added value to read Helsingin Sanomat or like some of the subscriptions we have there, because it adds value for you. It helps you in your day-to-day life. And we see that strongly, of course, also around certain topics, geopolitical and otherwise. So I think that's a very important part. On the advertising side, our position is, of course, me not being a Finn can probably more easily say that, reaching 96% of a population every single week with what we do, I find that a position that where there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it, but of course also a really strong position to make a meaningful difference on the advertising side.
Could it be interpreted that there's more room to lose rather than win in this market when you already almost have 100% of all eyeballs?
I think, you could look at it like that, that's fair enough, but I look at it more like, if you have that strong a position to reach, then we can also really make a difference to everybody in Finland on how you consume news, how you look at the entertainment side, and that I think will increasingly be the case.
Yeah. In the media side, what's your philosophy with AI? For example, Alma Media CEO Kai Telanne said in recent interview that they are either going to produce double the amount of news with AI or the same amount but with half the resources they use today. How do you view this?
Yeah, I think it's early days on the AI, but what I see happening on the productivity side, that's really encouraging to see. I think how to translate that into new solutions for the readers, for the customers, is of course the key thing. So I'm not thinking in doubling or halving or whatever. It's more, there's clearly a significant productivity gain you can have, and we will have around how we create content in all kind of ways, right? And the question is, how do you use that going forward, that time that you save, to then be even better towards, let's say, the readers, the customers here in Finland, with solutions that we have. So you will also, from our end, over time, see new solutions coming, but they need to add value to you. It's not an overload of more. It's also that curating element that's still very important.
Yeah. Have you seen any, I think one part of the discussion is technology, what we are able to do, but the other side of the discussion is that what are people, are they actually going to adapt to new technology or just going with their old ways? Do you see any signs that people would change the way they read news, like just asking things about ChatGPT or Gemini instead of going to ROAST.fi or Ilta-Sanomat?
Oh yeah, I mean, that is happening. And we try to learn as much as possible. At the same time, coming back to that position we have in the market, we see that a lot of people go directly also to us because they go to what they consider, based on our market research, of course, the trusted source where they want to go, and they know what they will get there. But of course, we're constantly also trying to see, what other solutions are there? How can we personalize that experience more and more without losing that point on? We also have a role here to play to show the broader picture, for example, on geopolitical, and not just on just the let's say the personalization element of it. So it's the combination of it, which makes it also exciting from a journalistic point of view.
Yeah. How do you feel investing in content? Whether I know these are very broad questions because Sanoma Media is actually quite sprawling business on TV, radio, music, and also the newspaper and digital parts and so. But in general, investing in content these days when AI can produce so much with so little and everybody is doing content. How do you feel investing in content in this competitive environment going forward?
Well, I mean, it comes back to the point, yes, AI is definitely having an impact on how you create the content, etc. But the fundamental point also on the media side is, of course, what does it add for our consumers, whether it's on the entertainment side or on the news side? So getting that right, I still believe, is very much what is a differentiating factor for us. And continuing to do that is what our media team, both in TV as well as on the journalistic side, are doing, of course, every single day.
Yeah, but you don't see any impact in your web page traffic in Helsingin Sanomat, for example, thus far, that people would turn more to other services or AI chatbots or so on?
Yeah, we see, obviously you see a lot of, everybody is sort of not everybody, but a lot of people are playing around with it. But the core point of also at some point knowing where you can go for a trusted kind of element is of course important.
Media Finland is targeting 12 to 14% EBITDA margin, which we haven't seen for years. So how are you going to get there?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at the team, so Pia Kalsta and the team are doing a great job in what have been, of course, difficult years as well, to really optimize the business from as efficient as possible without losing that longer term, let's say, focus and the quality. We're here really for the longer term, making a difference in the Finnish society, right? So that's an important one. We don't do short term things that jeopardize that. So that's happened. Clearly, the other part of it is the fact that also the economy would need to improve, and also because that would also increase the spending, that would also make it easier for people to be affordable on the subscriptions, but more importantly on the advertising side, we would see then a bounce back as well. And we need both of those elements. So on the one hand, that as efficient as possible, like we're doing, and then also the growing of the economy to get into that area of the 12 to 14%.
your main competitor Alma Media is already there in media side, but is it because they have less? I think they have less print news nowadays. It's mostly digital on their part. Or why are your competitor already there?
Yeah, I think then you would really need to go into the detail of the mix of business models that have. So that's not quite the comparison that's easy to make.
Okay, I think this is a question you get many times a year, but Learning and Media Finland, they are totally different businesses, and I think every investor, when they get to know to Sanoma, they begin to think that why are they under the same roof, and could Sanoma be split into two different businesses?
So the question is if it could be split or if we will split.
Could it be split, and then when will it happen?
Yeah, so I think we've been quite clear, or at least try to be clear on the fact that we agree with the fact there are two strategies for the media side and on the learning side. I personally believe they are very clear strategies. We execute on them. We have some synergies across those two businesses, but around the 6 million mark, so it's not nothing. It's at the same time, of course, not the core reason to just keep it together. But we said this is at the moment the way we feel we can best run both sides of the business. And it's also in combination with the fact that if you then look at the media side, being part of a bigger organization is also an important element in protecting and the longer term success of independent high quality media here in Finland.
Can you elaborate more? Does the media side regard like more financing, which comes from the learning side, or what's the purpose here?
Well, if you look at the media side, we touched on it earlier, right? You really see there the digital transformation happening, and we believe that's going well with the elements that I mentioned earlier. If you look at it in the current geopolitical climate, it's also very important that is really safeguarded with clear ownership here in Finland around the fact that you can keep that high quality independent journalism. So that element certainly is also there, but we believe fundamentally that in this structure at the moment we can execute on both these strategies well, and that's also what we're focused on.
But I think the media side has revenue something like €500 million.
Yes.
Euros, and if it would reach that EBITDA margin, it would have an EBITDA of over 50 million euros per year. So it should have enough money and war chest to defend itself as an independent business as well. I think in Finnish perspective, the €500 million revenue is quite much.
Yeah, I mean, opinions can differ a little bit on that. I think in general, I'm not saying that's not possible, but at the same time, we believe at the moment the focus is on making sure that both businesses execute on these strategies. And as you're saying, if you want to stay successful in media longer term and have that independent, high quality journalism, that reach, you will also need to be financially stable and successful.
Is this optimal combination from learning's perspective, where you have a higher growth outlook, it's a better margin business, it's a European-wide business, and still you have to, for example, yourself, you have to share your focus both on media and learning side. So would it be better for me learning to be actually independent company?
I mean, you can always argue that point, right? I think the way we have organized it means that also 80% of my time goes to where 80% of the profit more or less is coming from, which is the learning side. We can do that because we have a really strong, high quality management team on the media side, with, as I mentioned before, Pia Kalsta leading it. So I think that combination, this stage of where the business works well for us, and we intend to continue that.
Okay. How do you view the future media landscape in Finland? Like now there are Alma, Sanoma and regional medias, and then we have Yle, Otava. Maybe these are the biggest names. But over the next 10 years, how much consolidation should we see in this landscape?
Yeah, that's always a bit of the crystal ball type thing. Because also if you look at other markets, it has gone in different directions, right? So the initial response is, there must be more consolidation happening over time. And that might happen. But it takes, of course, parties to also then act in that way, right? And you've seen some markets where that has really happened, some other markets where that's not as happened. We know our position, we know our role, we follow all that as closely as we can, but we are not constantly thinking about the next consolidation that needs to happen. We really look at what's in the best interest now of our shareholders, and therefore also how do we even make our position even stronger in this market.
Now I have a few more, but they're mostly fun questions. Could you mention two competitors, one on the learning side and one on media side, that you admire and that are doing things very well, and you could maybe copy or you admire them?
It's good question. So on the media, globally. Yeah. So on the media side, I personally look also at DPG in Belgium, Netherlands. And why? Because they've also gone on growth. They're also trying to make that scale work. They also have the combination, the multi-channel one, and it's one that's relatively still close to me. There's, of course, lots going on in the US as well. We try to follow that too, right? On the learning side, it's not so much one competitor. It's more because our starting position is so strong on the methods and really supporting the teachers, etc. I always try to look as broad as possible on what else is happening, what's happening in EdTech, what are all the new things that are happening, because our role is not to have the latest technology, the quickest in the market, but see, are there elements that, that we should be doing better or faster? And so we constantly try to challenge ourselves on that, on the learning side, on that journey of more and more towards personalized learning. What can we do there? And that sometimes is in the form of a partnership then with a player, or it's also just being aware of great examples, and they can be anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Then lastly, I know that this is also owner and award question, but if you can have a free vision, where do you see Sanoma in 10 years from now?
Well, in 10 years, I mean, if you think about it from a learning perspective, then of course, the market will have moved a long way into, let's say, personalized learning. We will, of course, have grown significantly with our ambition, also M&A, but also organic growth. And I think our core support for the teachers and the students is still there, but much more in a personalized way, and our solutions will reflect that. But with that core high quality element there. On the media side, 10 years from now, that digital transformation we talk about will have truly happened, and probably already for a few years. That doesn't mean that there's no print anymore, but because that will depend on what you as a user or a consumer really want. So it's that combination that you'll see there. But the digital transformation will have, of course, gone very fast. And like we do a lot of work around what will that mean from let's say, the newest technology, and AI, of course, being one. But it's fundamentally around more and more personalization in both businesses.
And in 10 years from now, are there still only one Sanoma, or maybe two listed companies?
Could be either way, but fundamentally, of course, that's not the focus for us, because we say it's about the success of both those businesses. That could very well be together. That's our focus now. But most importantly, let's execute on the strategy of both businesses.
Exactly, and never say never. Thanks, Rob, for interesting discussion. Thanks for viewers for very good and intensive, some of these were quite intensive questions. Just to remind you, follow Sanoma on inderes.fi if you got more interested. And at this point, I'd like to wish everyone a very good summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.